actually a question earlier, specifically to you, Sophie, about whether Human Rights Watch actually adopts news practices and is too influenced by news practices in terms of deciding what stories to say. It sounds like you would say no, like it's not about, getting the story out there. Sometimes it's about protecting the person comes first.
Oh, 100%, or achieving the outcome you're trying to achieve, that policy change. Sometimes it's you don't want anything to be known until the very end. Sometimes you're informing as you go along, but there's a lot of things we work on that we don't talk about or say who's discussing what or promising what or what's going on behind the scenes. And it's really fascinating now how many people I work with in government who never would have answered my call as a journalist. I find it amazing now that they know that this isn't going to be broadcast anywhere, what we're talking about, and the access you get. I get quite blown away by it after spending so many years trying to get information out of people, and particularly when I worked at Four Corners. I mean, like, people were just like, oh my God, would not talk to you if you just like call up from Four Corners. Whereas it's the opposite these days. So it's fascinating to have made that change and see how it impacts what information you can access. And sometimes I feel now I get more the real story because they tell me, so before I'd, write an official kind of email asking the minister or whatever to tell me this. And, I'd get a very terrible reply back that never answered any of my questions. Whereas now I can actually call up someone in the office. They tell me, explain a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and I have a much better understanding of the issue than I would have had if I was a journalist. So I find that really interesting. But
then the public doesn't have that understanding.
But sometimes, that's what I'm saying, sometimes the public's knowing stuff doesn't actually make it better, And that's the realization I came to and why I left journalism.
Yeah, wow.
Just keying off the ethical framework we're talking about, I actually think, Sophie's selling herself short a bit. The decision not to tell people I'll go public on what she's researching is still, in a way, within that journalistic framework of the harms that might come to them from being public, compared to the international NGO outside Mosul, who is saying, oh no, that whole group of people there, you just can't talk to them, you can't film them. They're not doing that based on a harms to them. They're basically doing it on a framework of, well, we're providing a service to them, and our organisation doesn't exist to facilitate that contact. We're not gonna be involved in it. They would have to be outside of our little compound in order to talk to you. It's not really a weighing up what they're saying or their particular circumstances. It's more just like, we don't exist for that. It would be too hard.
You're right, Matt, and it's often about control, I think, as well. And part of the proceeds of my book go to MSF, because I always thought in the field they were impeccable in terms of how they protected the people they worked with. And when they talked, it wasn't about control with them. It was always about safety and getting their work and job done. Whereas other NGOs, I found it was about control. It was about the narrative. It was about them, trying to really control what was going on. Whereas MSF, it was always safety first. It was always getting the job done. And I really respected that, which is why I wanted to choose them as the charity that I gave some proceeds to. So, there's very different NGOs out there. And, the ICRC are really interesting because they won't tell you anything often.
We had an incident.
Brilliant work.
Sorry, I didn't mean to butt in. We had an incident in the Congo where one NGO, we were doing a story with child soldiers, and you can't identify them. You can interview them, but change the name. And then we came across another child soldier who wasn't being looked after or cared for by this NGO, and they said, yeah, sure, you can photograph that one. Like, it's not with us. And I thought that was quite interesting.